I love Storygraph, and I was in the middle of between like liking Storygraph and liking Fable, because Fable is an app that you can use, and Storygraph is an app plus a website that you can use. And I was on the fence about because people were like, "Oh, you should try Fable. Oh, you should try Storygraph." And I was like on the fence of which one I liked. And I really like Storygraph a lot better because the end of the month, you get those nice little stats. You get this little downloadable graph, like downloadables that you can like post to your social media. I just like Storygraph better. Fable, Fable is nice for community sometimes with posting, but Storygraph to me is just so much far superior as far as it goes. I really like Storygraph much better than Fable, um, because it has a website that you can use, and so if you're on a computer, it just has it's to me it's just far superior than Fable. Fable, it just doesn't have the website support. It's just too clunky in a sense to me. Um, so if you want to add me on Storygraph, link is in the description. Um, but I did my wrap up for January. I read 13 books in January, and I have a little graph. I read about 2,789 pages. I don't know because I was still getting the hang of using the Storygraph editions. So like some editions, so like the print versus digital versus uh audiobook are a little wonky. I still don't quite do those properly. I'm a little rebellious in that sense. That I don't always put the correct edition on there. But so I don't always put the print versus the digital on there properly, and I don't always put the audiobook. So technically, I've read 2,789 pages, but that doesn't include, sometimes like, who the F cares? That's the audiobook that I listened to in one afternoon. It was like an hour listen because I was in between books and I was like, oh, I'm just gonna listen to this one little. And, I read a cookbook. Y- I highly suggest that you count reading cookbooks and things like that, especially if you read it cover to cover. Um, Count those as you're reading books because those are definitely, you learn a lot from like cookbooks are like, so you learn so much about like how to live your life. The cookbook I read is Good and Cheap. Um, this month, it's how to live on less than $4 a meal. And it was how to budget yourself if you live on SNAP benefits, which I do. I do receive SNAP benefits. For me, it was kind of a how-to guide on how to make your food stamp stretch better, especially at this time when, food prices have gone up. Um, so it was very informative. I definitely highly recommend it if you are on food stamps to check out from your library. And actually, I got it on the Libby app. How to that was just there's so many books like that. But Good and Cheap was highly informative. It was such a good book for that. I talked about it on Book Sky, but Good and Cheap, such a good cookbook for people who need to stretch their budget and how to build a pantry on a cheap budget. Um, and like staple meals on how to build staple meals. So I think that's kind of important and how to build good wholesome meals. Um, because that's why I talk about cooking on this channel is because of things like that. So, um, but I read some other books. I read Ray Bear and I listened to the audiobook for Made in Crocodile. I liked Ray Bear a lot better than I liked Made in Crocodile. Um, and you heard me talking about Secret of the Three Fates. Actually, there's a video if you want to watch the video for Secret of the Three Fates about the stunner at the end of Secret of the Three Fates. Um, I also listened to the audiobook for Whereabouts. I kind of fell asleep during that book, but it was so ephemeral, that story. Um, because Whereabouts and House on Mango Street, there's like these little snippet stories, these little snippet moments. Whereabouts and House on Mango Street to me are very similar in the sense that like they're just these snapshot moments in a book that lead up to bigger moments. So I found those to be quite similar in a sense. House on Mango Street is I liked that a lot more. Whereabouts to me was a little bit more depressing in a sense. Um, but that's just how Jhumpa Lahiri writes. Uh, so I don't know. It's hard to explain because I read A History of Maladies for a college class, and it has that like heavy themes. So yeah, it was better to listen to an audiobook, I think, rather than reading it because I think I would have probably DNF'd it if I had to read it. Um, but it's worth a read. It's worth a listen at least, I think. Uh, yeah, I liked it. I liked it in a sense. Um, I didn't read. I finished the Analects, which was probably the heaviest book I read all month in January. Um, but I don't think I listened to a lot of audiobooks, um, mostly because I listened to one, two, three, five audiobooks out of the 13 books that so I listened to quite a bit of audiobooks in the month of January. I didn't actually read all of, like most of the books that I read. Um, well, I mean, it's still reading, but it's an audiobook. It's compared to like a book. But uh it's because I was having trouble like focusing on actually reading because in December I read something like 15 books. Like read 15 books. Like looked at the page books. So I was having a hard time like looking at the pages. Um so I just needed to give my eyes a rest. But actually, I went to the eye doctor and I broke my glasses in February, and that's why I'm wearing these old glasses from 2018. They're like an old prescription, and my eye doctor said that my prescription has gotten significantly worse. Uh, that's because I've been doing all this reading. So I'm just aging rapidly now. Uh, but favorite book of the month was Raybearer by Jordan Afuko. I loved that book a lot. I want to read the sequel, Redemptor, um, because I heard it's not as good, but if if it is at even 80% or 50% as good as Raybearer, I will appreciate it, I think. So I'm not too worried about it. It's still a very good book. It'll probably still be a very good book, in my opinion. Um, so I'm not terribly worried about that. Um, so I'm hoping to pick that up probably next month or the month after. Um, but yeah, so that's my reading wrap up. I hope you enjoyed. Hopefully, maybe you pick up some of those books that I read. I am a sad and corny poet. I got that off Twitter back when I was still on Twitter. I'm not on Twitter anymore. The fun things. I actually picked up two things off Twitter when I was still on Twitter, and one was hop water, and one was this t-shirt. I did make some great things. Oh my goodness. My cat. I gotta go. I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.